Redditors, who turned down a marriage proposal. How did it go and why? My mother had a sweetheart back in the 50s who got her name tattooed on his arm and then proposed. She turned him down. Cue sad trombone. Last she heard, he had married someone with the same name as her. Not me, but some poor soul at my local bowling alley. We were rolling rocks on a Friday night. The bowling alley was happening. The tune stopped and the guy on the intercom asked if we could all direct our attention to lane 16. A guy dropped to his knee and asked his lady friend to marry him. She said no. She looked embarrassed and stormed out. He took a swig of his beer and rolled a ball down the lane. I'd like to think he thought the music would come back on and everyone would go about their business. Nope. Everyone was shocked and just watched him bowl like 4 times before the music came back on and he finally just sat down. Felt like an eternity of cringe. My mom turned down my dad's original proposal. My parents had been dating for roughly 3 months when they got pregnant with me. They had moved in together and things had been going well. My mom was making dinner and my dad was on his knees fixing the kitchen door and out of nowhere he asks her to marry him. She thinks he's kidding and tells him he can't be serious. His exact line was, "Well, I'm already on my knees." He had married before but had been separated from his ex-wife for a number of years. But they were still technically married. So my mom told him he needed to get that figured out and propose in not such a dopey way. I found out my ex was cheating on me and immediately broke it off with him. The next day he showed up on my doorstep in the snow crying. When I went outside he got on one knee and presented me with a heart-shaped ring. I went back inside and baked cookies. It was a greater decision, as I met my current boyfriend a few years later and he makes me truly happy. High school BF had dumped me after 2 years, revealing that he had never truly loved me. I went to college, and we still had occasional contact over my first semester. When I came home for Christmas break, he asked me to give him a ride home from where we had been with a group of friends, telling me he needed to ask me something. In my car in front of his apartment, he told me that he didn't want an answer right then, to go home and pray about it. But God told him to ask me to marry him. I went home and went to sleep instead, and told him no thank you the next day. He seemed disappointed but totally unsurprised. I was working in retail in the US. A customer saw my common French name on my name tag. He grabbed my hand and said, "You are French and beautiful. You need to come back to my country with me and marry me." I declined. He stood there declaring his love for me until his friends dragged him away. Sorry to disappoint, dude, but I'm actually not French in any way. My mom just picked it out of a baby book. A girl asked to marry me in 3rd grade. I said no. I don't have time for marriage. I need to play with my friends. She said okay. I went on to play with my friends. All things considered, I think that went well. Not me, but my wife. While she was at BCT for the National Guard. Before we were married. But we had been dating about 5 years at that point. A guy with a very thick accent told her that he needed to speak to her father. Well, she has not had contact with her father since sometime early in high school. Hell, I've never met him. Never planned to either, and she told this guy such. He then went on and said that he must speak to her father. Eventually it comes out that he wants to speak to her father about her dowry. Something about his father has many cattle and he could provide for her very well. I think she told him something about how that's not how things are done in the US. Her father had no say in who she married, and she was happily dating someone. Dude backed off and apparently was otherwise pleasant for the rest of the time there. Just a monstrous amount of culture shock. I still laugh about it every time I remember her telling me about it. We'd only been together for a few months. Both military and stationed in Germany. I was about to deploy and my contract ended pretty much as soon as I was set to return. She said we should get married so we could stay together when I got back. I'd already been divorced at this point and wasn't about to marry some girl I'd only been with a few months. So I told her we'd see how we held up with me deployed and cross that bridge when we came to it. About 2 months into my deployment, she and a friend of mine eloped. I was hurt, but boy did I dodge a bullet. Also, their marriage ended exactly how you'd expect. Divorced in less than 6 months. She was f-king a couple other guys on the side and he was too stupid naive to realize. Remember folks, if they'll cheat with you, they'll cheat on you. Boyfriend of 2 years at the time. I was 18 and visiting him while he was stationed in another state. I thought he was joking when he told me we could go to the courthouse and get it done. When I laughed and said no, he tried pitching all the benefits we would get. When I said no again, he stormed out angrily and called me later drunk, telling me I was a bitch for rejecting his marriage proposal. I broke up with him soon afterwards. Abusive ex-BF hit me up after 3 years of no contact. Out of the blue asked for a lunch date to talk. We met. Had awkward small talk, and after, when I thought he was driving me home, he took me back to our old high school football stadium. We would hang there when we dated, and he got down on his knee and begged for me back, and then pulls out a ring and asks me to marry him as well. I apologized and politely declined. I'd had a miscarriage when we were together and he was absolutely terrible to me during. He told me it obviously wasn't his because his seed would have been strong enough to survive, and I was lying. Every time I look at his face I hear those words. His seed would have been strong enough to survive. You've got to be kidding me. That guy is mental. Wish you the best. We were in preschool, he proposed with a leaf and we weren't even dating. He asked me in public, which he knew I hated the thought of. We had actually talked about wedding proposals a few weeks prior and I had made it clear that I would never say yes to a proposal in public. He still felt it necessary to ask me at a concert of a band his friend was in. I said no. He didn't take it graciously. And I got a lot of hate from everyone who was literally around me. People were cussing me out for declining. Without even knowing my name. I broke up with him shortly afterwards. Because he didn't stop whining about me embarrassing him so. This guy once proposed to me on like our second or third date. He was acting weird and I slowly realized what was going on. He pulled out a ring. In a bowling alley. I literally ran away. I have no idea what happened to him after that. I was proposed to in 2013. He took me into the mountains with a lit picnic of fruit and cheese. We looked at the stars and he brought a paper lantern to release. He didn't know you're supposed to do it over water so it can actually fly into, not land amongst the trees and start a forest fire. I had to tell him that it wouldn't work. Then he told me he wanted to spend his life with me and asked if I would marry him. I said no. Because I was 17 and we were both fresh out of high school, and also, I didn't even know he even had a crush on me. He told me that any two righteous people can be happy together with the blessing of the Lord, regardless of initial attraction. I said big no and called a friend to pick me up. Teenagers are f***ing crazy. Edit. So my parents told me the thing about needing water. They definitely knew it wasn't true, as they're really intelligent. So I guess they had an ulterior motive. Worked at game when I was about 18. This one dude would roam the store for hours at a time. I thought he was just killing time. So I didn't mind it too much. I did end up talking to him. And he would then for a few weeks walk past my workplace to see if I was in or busy. And if I was all free he would drop in to talk with me. Eventually, in the middle of a random conversation about Pokemon or something, he just asks me if I want to marry him. Still not completely sure if he was serious or not. Because of how awkward he made it. If it was meant as a joke there was no chance to understand that it was. Laughed and said sorry, have a boyfriend. I had been dating a guy I was really into for 3 months before we found out we were pregnant. I told him I wasn't in the business of trapping guys and that he could walk away no strings attached if he wanted. He said I'm not going anywhere and suggested we get married. I had to turn him down because I didn't want to get married just because I was pregnant. However, a week later, after the initial shock wore off, he was still there being 100% supportive. He was from a deeply Southern Baptist family. and offended me at every turn. He said, "I don't care what they say about me, but I won't tolerate them saying bad things about you." A week later I told him, "Okay, let's get hitched." Been married for almost 7 years in May. I used to deliver pizza. I was the only female driver out of the 6 pizza shops in town. I delivered once a week to a disabled guy. Around week 5, he finally tells me I'm very beautiful and asked me to marry him. I kinda chuckled nervously and explained that I was already married. I had never hightailed it away from a customer so fast. 2 months later, we hired another female driver. He did the same thing to her, and she was also married. It was really awkward. We had been dating a matter of weeks. He said while we were out having a meal, "What would you do if I asked you to marry me?" I replied, "Why are you asking me that?" He proceeded to get down on one knee. I quietly tell him to get up and no before too many people notice. I've never eaten food so fast to get out of there. I was in a relationship with a guy for 3 years. He always told me he didn't want children or to get married. This was fine for me at the time, but I was honest with him and said eventually we will break up. So we continued on until it felt our relationship hit a wall. We were fighting constantly and it was just time to end it. We broke up mutually and were able to hang out until I started dating again. He asked to meet me to talk, where he begged me to be with him. I said, "I'm sorry, we both want different things. You don't want to get married." He said, "Okay, let's get married then." I said, "But you don't want kids." He said, "Okay, we can have one for you." I had to explain to him this isn't going to work if you don't truly want them. He could grow to resent me for it. He ended up married a year later and I'm truly happy that he found someone. A beautiful woman who I loved with all of my heart, and I still think about her almost every day. She asked me to marry her, but I was afraid and I said no. I still hear the way her voice broke when the word left my lips. It's my biggest regret in life. My whole life past my early 20s would be wildly different and probably for the better. I live each day with the choice I made. She's married now to a really great guy. They have 2 children and I talk to her once every several years. I'm in my mid-late 30s. Single, never married, with a beautiful dog. I know my life isn't over and in a lot of ways I'm in a really good place. That memory never goes away though. I know I made the wrong choice. TLDR. Never give in to fear. Edit. Thanks for the gold, kind stranger. Never been gilded before. Thank you. I just hope my story helps some person out there really take a good assessment of what they've got. I had to go to night school when I was 16 because I was failing social studies. There was a guy in my class who was like 21 who immediately sat next to me and started talking to me and asking me questions. I was kind of shy and passive and he dressed punkish like me. So I figured cool, he wants to be friends. It came up that I was 1/4 German and later in the class he passed me a note that said something like "You're my little Nazi GRRL." Kinda freaked me out. While I was waiting for my mom he basically jammed his tongue down my throat. I tried to avoid him from then on. And eventually he found me in school. And gave me a letter. It was like 8 pages of how we're perfect for each other, and it ended with a proposal and how we were going to spend all of our Christmases together. Fortunately he got shipped across the country for heroin rehab. But oh boy. That was something. My ex and I were broken up but gently considering trying to fix things and maybe at some point get back together. We hung out frequently and both still had strong feelings for each other, were affectionate and sexually exclusive. Both of us said we didn't want to sleep around at the time but didn't want to stop sleeping with each other. Honestly, didn't 100% believe he wasn't having sex with anyone else. Things were going pretty good compared to some recent bad times. I thought maybe it could work. Then he asks me to marry him. Talks about moving somewhere else. Like he's on drugs or something. Sounds panicked. Reveals that he has gotten a random person pregnant. That was super fun. Interestingly, she faked the pregnancy because she's a crazy bitch. But I appreciate her for ending things between him and I. She's 7 and my daughter. We agreed to just be best buds. Alrighty then. I was new to US. 26 years old. In grad school. In a small town in Texas. Knew a small community of my minority group. They wanted to help me out. I got to know them. One of them was the head of a pretty rich family. He had FCKU money. He offered me a quick way out of my problems. Which is marrying his 18-year-old niece. Under immigration laws. I would get green card and eventually citizenship. Not only that. I was offered a job in the family business. Which is some law firm in New York City. I denied the offer. But I always wonder what if I didn't. I have no regrets. But my life would have been way easier. My wife refused my first proposal. We just got home from the bars and we were eating chicken wings in bed after SI time. I got up to get a napkin and when I came back and I held out a flat wing that I had eaten everything I could have off of it and asked her to marry me with it. She laughs about it to this day. I turned down a marriage proposal that would have made me $15k. About 12-13 years ago I worked at Taco Bell. Became pretty good friends with a few people that worked there. And the nighttime manager asked me to marry his sister so she could come to the US legally from the Dominican Republic. He offered me $15k. Half up front. The other half after a year. He said he would keep all her stuff at my place so it looked like she lived there. And if anyone showed up asking about her or our marriage, all I would have to do is say she was at work. Or the mall. And he would bring her right over and we would deal with it. In year 18 working at Taco Bell. $15k is pretty tempting. My grandmother broke up with my grandfather when he went to propose. She wanted to date other people. Their relationship started when she babysat his little brothers and lied about her age for a few years before he found out the truth. He was 5 years older. They stayed in touch and she dated around a little bit. But he never did. She eventually got sick with tuberculosis and was in a quarantine hospital for a couple of years. He wrote her a letter confessing that he was still in love with her and proposed in writing. She took him up on it. He had 3 strokes last year and his health has declined drastically after being the paradigm of health for 82 years. She has terrible arthritis. But they've been married for 58 years this year and you can still find them dancing together in the gazebo or making out in the dining room. I asked him last year why he always chose her and he burst into tears and said, "I just never met anyone else I liked better than her. Still haven't. And now I'm crying." I was 17. He was 25. I threatened to leave him after we'd had a brief argument and he slammed my arm in a door while trying to stop me from walking away. His apology involved throwing a ring, still in its box, at my head. Needless to say, the answer was a solid no from me. Unfortunately. Being young and dumb. I put up with him for another 2 years before calling it quits. So many teenage girls with grown men. Gross. Glad you didn't end up marrying him. My sister-in-law was proposed to at McDonald's with the ring hidden in the Happy Meal. Suffice to say she declined. I said no because I didn't love him. He tried to escalate but my mother intervened. Yanking the phone out of my hands and yelling at him. This was all over the phone. So no violence. Also, I was 15. And he was my uncle who was in his 50s. There wasn't that much drama. Of course. It was a drunk guy asking me to marry him after I served him a beer in the break of a boxing match. He proposed to me another 3 times that night with increasing fervor and then his wife tipped me a tenner for putting up with him.